group front page, which has all the relevant links and is kept up to date.
Yeah, probably the links in the notes of this meeting are already more up to date about that. Thanks, we do. Yeah, we wait until 4 past, as usual. And for sure, we are still missing Karsten.
I also think that Michael would join. He mentioned that he has a conflict, but I think that's more like leaving later.
Oh, I see. Hello, Karsten. So I hope Karsten is actually getting coffee and not having audio problems.
I'm seeing activity of the GitHub issue for the name for the URI path short option. So I see that as a very good sign.
I would just go for URI path short.
Yeah, I think that's where we'll wind up. Yeah.
Can you hear me now, Karsten? Can you talk? There's no audio coming from you if you're talking. Is it only me?
Is it better?
Yes, it works now.
Okay, now I only have to set the gain.
Better already.
Okay, so that seems to have worked. Sorry.
No problem. Perfect timing. Yeah, it's 4 past, so let's get started. Hi, everyone. This is an interim meeting of the core working group. We are resuming the series now until IETF 124. This is Marco. My co-chairs are Karsten and Jaime. And as usual, this is an official IETF meeting, so the not well applies. Get familiar with that if you're not already. If you have any personal knowledge of IPR and patents, you have to disclose that ASAP or refrain from participating in related technical discussions. It's also something special about our code of conduct, so please be nice and professional with each other. And the only agenda item we have for today is Christian's and Michael's document shopping name to be discussed. If we want to, for which Christian submitted version 1 today, and we have slides also from Christian. We have you in the queue, and then Karsten. Go ahead, Christian.
No, I think I was requesting slides, given that I'm first up.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, I was
Thank you.
just going to say, any other business we could do a brief, have a brief look at href.
Sure. Well, and I'll try to take notes. Any help is appreciated.
Okay, I guess that means I can start.
Please do.
Yep. Okay, so short paths in co-op. This is coming back from like about 4 years ago, where we've talked about this briefly in the context of, I think it was back then, ad hoc, with the desire to like have something shorter than well-known paths. So the general issue is sending a get to well-known something usually takes like 17-ish bytes of path. So that in ad hoc we were not really happy about that. The most recent complaint was around the Brewski, because there's like .wellknown / Brewski or .wellknown / est. And there's a bit of like the general feeling I got was a bit of jealousy, because other SDOs can just go ahead and do something without limitation by any BCP that we follow. That is, we don't hog the namespace of a web server. Other SDOs can just do that. So what can we do to just like do it right? And I think the easy solution is to define a numeric option called short URI path for now, but that's like I'm open to discuss the name. Probably URI path short it will be. That would be a numeric option, and that numeric thing expands to say .wellknown core or .wellknown ad hoc or whatever. I think that should be a reasonably simple thing to do. That option would be critical because the server has to understand it. It can be safe to forward, even though URI path is not. So there is a bit of interaction with the proxy URI option, but I think it's like for all practical purposes, this option can traverse proxies safely, and that makes it way easier to deploy compared to making it non-proxy safe. There are a few interactions that this can have. I think the most important one for the two well-known paths that I would start with is with URI query. So the option can be combined with URI query. For example, well-known core is often combined with a query that filters for a particular resource type or for a particular interface. To do that without upsetting the common way that linear co-op option handling happens, this option should have a small option number. It should be small anyway to be efficient, but this kind of, if we want to be before URI query, there's only one option that makes sense, that is 13. It could interact with itself in the sense that there can be multiple occurrences. And I'd like to present this now more as a like extension of like one thing that people can do as well, and rather not the like that main thing when you start explaining it, because there can be situations where you have a well-known prefix and then more things. And I think that the typical case would be to treat the other items as URI path. Technically, this so that would be strings that come after it. Technically, every registered number could define its own mechanism, but I think treating them as URI path strings is what most applications will be happy with if they need repeated options at all. This has interactions with proxy URI, which is, if I had to rank the co-op options, my very least favorite one. So the one interoperability hazard that we might have if we go with the safe to forward version is that if a proxy for some reason took a request that was composed of a URI, short URI path, URI query, and URI host and proxy scheme, and because it may, I really don't know why it should, but recomposes this as it forwards it into a proxy URI. And then if it doesn't know that there's a short URI path option, then it could compose something that the receiver would then have to like dissect back into options and then treat it and then splice in the short URI path, which is kind of not that bad, but it's completely awkward. But I don't know if that even happens or whether that's allowed. And if we might come to the conclusion that it's not allowed, then we can spend less time writing text about it. And yeah, last but not least, maybe it makes sense to also allow this to coexist with URI path and just make them like produce URI path components as they come in sequence. I don't think there's anything bad about that. We shouldn't like, as with the suffixes, we shouldn't promote it too much. It's just if you have an application where you need that, there's no good reason to rule it out completely. So summarizing and adding a few more questions. What I'd like to know, especially from the working group, is it justified that we use the number 13 for this? I hope so. Should we do anything about encourage? So a danger I see here is that we're encouraging to do more through well-known paths rather than discovering URIs. I think things should be generally more discovered, but then again, if someone wants to do it that way, I think it's fine. So that's a bit of like, what's the term, Technikfolgenabschätzung, making sure the technology is not too much prone to abuse. Adding well-known ad hoc is something we could probably do. I have to go through my notes of the last IETF meeting where we discussed whether ad hoc should go that path or use some other more efficient way of encoding itself. There's one question on the almost editorial side it's a bit editorial, but IANA related, on how we present the options about what comes after the first short option. So we could say that it's really up to the implementation, up to the registered number to say something. We could enumerate a few behaviors and say like pick one of those or do a custom one. Or maybe, and that's the one I'm leaning towards, is to say that there's a default behavior that is everything that comes after is a text string that is to be a URI path option. That's like not bad. It's not harmful to anything, to any path where there are not expected to be any resources below it. And the document is phrased in such a way that a server can just like start treating those options as an error if they come up. Yeah, I'm open to any guidance. Michael has made a proposal already that would turn this into a list of behaviors. And as that would also be part of the IANA registry list, like is that a field or is that a yes/no flag for is it default or is it custom? There's also the question of do we want to do or do we have to do anything about this technically being kind of a cross-reference into other IANA registry? Should that other IANA registry get a like note that, hey, maybe if you add something there, you might also want to add something here? Is there anything foreign key-ish? But I don't think that we have to decide that in full because like IANA will review this anyway. If you're happy with everything that I've proposed here so far, then there are two more questions. That is bike shedding the option name, leaning toward URI path short because that's like what everyone else is going with, and the document name because I just said short paths in co-op, abbreviated shopping, fine, let's do it. But like if you want to discuss that and nothing else is to discuss, I'm happy with it too. And the final question is like, what does it take for us to like be done with it? Because I think that for applications such as Cbrusky, it would be really great if they could just put a normative reference in there, say the server has to support this, and then clients don't have to go through sending the short URI path option, seeing that a bad option comes back, and falling back to sending the full path, but they could rely on the server to process the short path option because it's part of the specification, because it's referenced, and that would make things easier for the clients. I don't think we should make the same optimization for the server because clients could be generic clients, so the server should always recognize the full expanded path as well. But the client should be able to rely on it. Oh, great! No comments on the other questions because there's already chat discussion about the document name. I like it. Yeah. More seriously, what can I do to make this happen faster and better?
Yeah, let me start at the bottom. Can we ship this in time for Cbrusky? Sure, by delaying Cbrusky as much as we need. We could do an adoption call pretty quickly because you said you started talking about this 3 years ago. We definitely talked about the use of well-known before RFC 6690 was published, and people had the idea of maybe doing another option. And at the time, we thought this would add complexity to CoAP that we didn't need. And I think that the proposal now is pretty good about avoiding some of that complexity. So I'm not unhappy, and I think we should be able to do this quickly because, after all, we have talked this through for 12 years now. Option and document name, I think the important thing is it's not the paths that are short. It's a short option for representing the path. So that should stay clear, and we are not doing routing here, finding the shortest path first or something like that. Yes, a little bit of bug shedding about the document name and option name may be possible during the call for running adoption. On the upper half of this slide, yes, the number 13 is justified. Again, we have been discussing this for 12 years and now seem to have a technical proposal that makes sense. I think we really have to spend a little bit more time about the unsafe bit. So we are smuggling this in there by not setting the unsafe bit, and your draft text currently says, oh, your iPath should also not have been proxy unsafe. Let's talk about a few examples of how different nodes on the path of a request may bungle this up. Depending on different knowledge about this particular option. And if we're still happy with that, then we can use number 13. Yeah, making it easier to use .well-known. Yeah, that's always, if you provide support for something that may sound like you want to increase usage of it, we just want to reduce the pain of what we already have. But there's no way to say this formally. Ad hoc, really good question. I don't have a position on right now. Multiple option handling, definitely go for a default. You didn't talk about the IANA considerations for the registry that goes with this draft. We could design the registry in such a way that it actually is machine readable. Then having a default multiple option handling process would enable a completely automatic integration of a new option.
Good point, yes.
That doesn't work for custom. So having a default or custom bit in the registry might be the best way to make the life of implementers easy. IANA interactions, not sure what that was.
The topic of being like a foreign key into another registry, or updating that other registry to say, and by the way, if you register something there, here you might also want to register it there.
What is the other registry?
The well-known registry. Technically, this one is just a string expansion, so it's
Yes.
not technically a foreign key into .well-known, especially because it could also be used for non-well-known options at the discretion of the designated expert. Yeah, so that's probably a very weak point.
We should help the designated expert a little bit with that discretion. Yeah, I think we need to minimize the complexity we create for IANA. So just telling people that if they do a new well-known for co-op, it may be a good idea to register something in this thing is probably correct. But we don't really want people to register something that they don't need. So unless they're already feeling the pain of using this 11-character .well-known thing, there's no encouragement needed to register something. So I think let's try to keep this minimal. Okay, so time-wise, I think there should be a -02 with maybe a few of those questions already answered, if that's possible for you. And yes. Then we should do an adoption call, well, within the next few days after the -02 is available. And then, of course, we will get technical comments in the adoption call, which will allow us to iterate quickly through a number of revisions, which then, if everything runs well, could be working group last called in September.
Thanks. I think I've written down most of what I need to work into the document. Yeah, if I understood correctly, like URI path short is a good option for the name because you started with down there.
If you find a better word for short, that would be even better.
Concise.
Yes.
Which is not a concise word, but
no.
Okay.
Torres.
Yeah, so sorry for likely very unknowledgeable, stupid question. I was trying to understand, how often the normal resolution of .well-known is necessary if you do the resolution thing, right? Because I'm trying to understand to what extent we're actually also helping to avoid a lot of resolutions when people can use well-known all the time because it's shorter now with this work, right? So do I understand it correctly that if you're trying to resolve .well-known to a shorter one, then the validity of the shorter one can really only be guaranteed for as long as your quote connection exists, but not beyond that. True or false?
I don't quite understand what you mean by resolving well-known in the first place. So
there, I forgot what the mechanism is, right? But if you have some .well-known stuff, you always have the option to ask if there is an abbreviation for it. So we did that in C. Bruschi, for example, in our examples. I forgot what the mechanism is called.
There is not really a negotiation mechanism. It's just like try the short one, and as long as that works, you're good. And if it doesn't work, send the full path.
Okay, now I'm
Because-
confused because I thought there was a resolution mechanism.
It's talking about the core RT equals, and it returns a list of paths that you can use, and they could be quite short.
Yes.
And I think that's valid, Torless. I think that's valid for eternity for a given server.
But how do you know that that server is not rebooting with a different configuration sometime in the next 10 minutes?
I think if it does that and gives up its path, then it did the wrong thing.
I don't think those are valid for eternity, but either way, that is not what is happening in this document. So this document is not the short path. The short expression of the path is not something that the server offers at a particular numeric value. It is something where there's a constant mapping from already well-known address paths to static numbers. So there is nothing to no discovery result other than does it work or does it not work.
No, I understand that. What I'm saying is that I'm trying to understand the larger context, because I think if it is as bad with the alternative approach as I think it is, then that makes this document a lot more valuable. And the way that Zebrowski started out was saying, well, one way on how we achieve short path is to do this lookup for .rt, and that returns short path. And then from then on, you can always use the short path. And first of all, we don't have a lot of follow-up, right? So there are only, in Zebrowski, very few transactions typically. So, doing it for the second and third doesn't really help that much if the overhead for the first is already relevant. And secondly, and that was what my question was about, is how safe is it even to use the shorter path when there is no clear definition for how long they're valid? And so that was, I was thinking that if I do a lookup with the RT and it returns me a short path, I'm only guaranteed that this short path is valid in the same connection, but not afterwards, because in the meantime I build a new connection. This could be an anycast address. The server could have been rebooted. A lot of reasons why the dynamically discovered shorter path is different or doesn't exist.
Very brief one, please. Okay, sorry, I got interrupted. To my understanding, the well-known core resource or any lookup result you get from there has a max age. By default, that is 60 seconds. Okay. Devices can offer a larger max age. I don't know to which extent that happens, but if some path discovered through there is supposed to be used for longer than 60 seconds, which would probably be like how long you do immediate follow-ups, then at least the validity of the well-known result needs to be reestablished, or more practically, that response should have a long max age in the first place. Okay. Which then the client might want to clamp to, for example, I don't know, the lifetime of the DNS record, because like maybe that device promises serving that resource for some time, but the DNS name switches around, something like that.
So if we wanted to stick with the current suggested method in the Zebrowski drafts, which is to kind of provide such a shorter thing, then this could be done across multiple connections by signaling an appropriate, indefinite lifetime or whatever a very large number is. Okay.
Although, like 32-bit seconds is 32-bit uint max seconds is, I think, the longest that you can.
Yeah. Okay. So that's good, but it still leaves, of course, the trouble of the additional round trip, and especially if the client cannot remember the answer, that's bad as well. So the other question then was, the .well-known is not only used with CoAP, but also with HTTP, right? So
Yeah.
The registry is currently shared, and if with what you're proposing here, that would be a separate registry for the shortened one.
Technically, it's not even a registry for the shortened one. It's more like the shortened one. Yeah, it's a separate registry, yes.
Okay.
But it just expands to strings, which is like most of them will probably be in the well-known space. But technically, those are separate things. It's just you would need a very good justification to register anything that's not that's not starting with .well-known.
Yeah, I'm just trying to understand what's the likelihood of more need for double registration for the same functionality between CoAP and HTTP then.
I mean,
So you don't abbreviate path names in HTTP, so you can forget that.
Right. So I'm registering some .well-known for HTTP with a quote non-shortened path name, but I do an additional registration for a shorter one for CoAP then with this new proposal.
If you want to, yes.
yes.
Okay. Okay.
So I think it's important to keep in mind that well-known is used for a lot of things, and only a few of them actually have good use in CoAP. And most of these are not for discovery. They are for accessing very specific things. So if you look into RFC, what is it, 6920, the NI document, you find a use of well-known that could be switched on by an option like this, if we think that's a good thing to do, which is entirely unrelated to discover.
And it would use a binary opaque value in there because that's the efficient way to express that very thing. Nice, I like that.
Yeah, I was just trying to figure out if we can guess at what opinion the HTTP world would have about this work.
I don't think that really applies to the HTTP world because this is just this is really just a compression mechanism.
Correct.
It's a shortcut for writing something that is a completely valid URI, an expanded URI, just with fewer bytes on the wire, which is something HTTP very clearly does not concern itself with.
True, but on the other
it's
hand, is it fair to say that the word that comes after the compressed .well-known header is still registered as in before? So Brewski or something, well-known Brewski. And we're just saying that well-known Brewski, when we amend the IANA registration with this new work option, that would also be possible to do under the uncompressed option.
Sorry, I didn't understand what you were asking.
Okay,
maybe it helps. Maybe it helps to point out that the registrations in the one and the other registry don't have to be like exactly one-on-one. For example, if you if there was something C. Brewski like that didn't have like arbitrary words path components after there, but like 3 or 4 common ones. So let's call this protocol foo, and that has like that. And the typical way to access foo would be, say, to use either /.wellknown foo bar or .wellknown foo buzz. Then in the well-known registry, they would only register .wellknown foo because, like, if you're registered in there, you can, as I understand, do anything below that within the document you registered as describing this. And then you can decide whether it makes sense to, and that's really up to that protocol, to ask for 4 different code points. One saying number 4 means .wellknown foo bar, and number 5 means .wellknown foo buzz. Or you could say number 4 is .wellknown foo, and after that we like do something else. But those registries don't necessarily have a one-on-one mapping.
Okay, but wait a second. So did I understand you correctly that foo and the next path component bar or bad with the new registry option also have a compressed binary representation?
They can have if someone registers them, then they can have, then even a composite path can have a short binary representation.
Well, I think that's great, because I think this resolves one of the concern why I was asking, which is that so far I think people that
Yeah.
are thinking about supporting a particular functionality both for HTTP and for CoAP would start, picking as short as possible um, path components so that they work as short as possible in the CoAP case. And HTTP people might find that maximum obfuscated, because they themselves would have picked a longer,
Yeah.
more descriptive path component name, right? But
Yes. So
now
this
with the
decouples
binary
them.
option, you basically can always pick the good descriptive one that, let's say, lingers to the HTTP audience, and then do the binary option that you also register for CoAP.
Yes.
Yeah, cool. Because I mean, this is how the whole Cbrewski thing started out, that we were going back and forth and duplicating ASCII path components from Brewski into Cbrewski and make them shorter in the process. And that was kind of annoying, right? Because why the heck would you want to have two set of ASCII strings, in the next protocol we would do? And if we only had an ASCII option, it would certainly by default go into very short, very undescriptive ASCII components. And that
Yeah.
would be, I think, from the HTTP side, more painful, even from the registry side. So I think in this respect, this work can also be sold to the HTTP people by saying, well, it does avoid that with more and more CoAP in the future, we're getting a lot more shorter and shorter obfuscated string registrations.
Yeah. I don't even think that it needs to be like sold to HTTP people. It's more like, okay, we've solved that problem. We can just say, okay, we've solved that problem. You design the path as you want. Just tell us ahead of time so that we can make the appropriate registration.
I didn't understand that.
We don't have like to make people in the HTTP world particularly aware of it. It's just I think it might just suffice that. Oh, sorry that say that like sorry that we were like problematic about doing short things. We can just do it the way you always did it. We have a way of managing it. Let's just make sure that for every like new path we know how what their expectations are. So like whether there's arbitrary path components after that, or whether it's registered path components.
Yeah, I was thinking
Because
more about the point when somebody trying to solve a new protocol problem is thinking simultaneously about HTTP and CoAP,
yeah,
right? So
yeah,
which I think is something we want to encourage, right? So if some new application group or other protocol group
yeah,
wants to solve a problem, and they of course, like kind of in quote, don't
yes,
think about CoAP first, and one of us folks comes and say, hey, you not need to downsize your equipment options in the future, make it work for CoAP in the first place. At that point in time, you start thinking about these stupid short string names, and with this work we're avoiding getting into that discussion.
yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, next in the queue. Still on the open questions in the slide, I pretty much agree with what Carsten said. I just complement with 2 points. One is on pre-populate with edhoc. Well, it would be correct, and it would be probably quicker and safer from a timeline perspective. I read the alternative way you propose in the draft, Christian, on updating the semantics of the edhoc option. Yeah, that should also work, if I got it correctly. It will require some more thinking. I don't think we put thinking exactly on that point in Madrid, but I should also check those notes. It's probably a trade-off between how much we want to be fast about that. It's just a design that requires some more thinking.
I think it's a trade-off about being fast. It's also about whether using the ad hoc option without an OSC option has like any other benefits, or if any other difficulties. So if we find that there are other reasons to do that, then it might be good to follow that path. If it's just for compressing this away, yeah, why bother?
Yeah, so the easy, lazy, safe way is prepopulate.
Yeah.
Which is not wrong, by the way, and it's probably simpler. Okay, yeah. The other thing, in the interest of version -2 to consider for adoption, right now you are having informational as intended status. I believe you mean standard struct, right?
Quite frankly, it's probably whatever the last template I copied said.
Right. It really looked like an oversight, and it's written like a standard struct starting from the BCP 14 terminology. And I guess we don't want this to be a downref in other documents and so on.
Yes.
So when you push 02, please update the standard struct if that's what you really mean. I think so. And I really care to have an adoption call with the intended status. Thank you. Karsten, you're next, I think. Yeah.
I just quickly looked at the ad hoc situation. This sounds really simple. This removes the UI path and replaces it by a 2-byte option. So I think that's a quick win.
3-byte, but yes. It's 2-byte really only for .well-known core, because that is 0-byte option value.
Yeah, I had that in mind. Why is it 3 bytes?
Because the option header, so it's if we take option number 13, which I think is also the earliest we can do, 13 does not fit in the delta. And usually with a request, you don't have an earlier, smaller option. So the delta is really 13. Okay. That means you have one delta len, then 1 byte for the delta. And unless the option value is 0 length, which is the numeric number 0, which would probably be well-known core, then there's 1 more byte. So it's 3 in total.
Okay, I didn't remember that there's nothing in front of that. Okay, thank you.
Hi. So actually, I think that calculation might be off, because there would otherwise another option that had nothing else in front of it that might have a bigger gap anyway. But that's my hypothesis. But anyway, I just wanted to respond to Torlis's comment that with this option, the rationality in something like Cybruski to do the core resolution and then get a shorter path goes away. And yeah, I think that's fine. I think that's an okay result. And I think that I don't mind that we're going that direction at all. I think it's simpler for the clients, and I think it's simpler for the servers. So that's all.
Torles?
Yeah, it's Michael. If I sounded as if I wanted to defend that resolution step, then maybe I was misrepresented. I always wondered about the need for that complexity, and I wish we could have avoided that from the beginning. And of course, it would be lovely if we could remove any reference to that from the Cebruski documents, if it's not too late for that, just to avoid having more people like myself looking into that and wondering when to do it, because it's mentioned in the RFC, so we should implement it, which I think we shouldn't once we have this work.
So one question that I'll have from hearing you talk about Brewski is whether for Brewski and EST really the default, or for EST probably yes, for Brewski the default behavior makes sense. So the default behavior, as I would now phrase it, is that any option after the initial URI path compact is to be taken as a text string and appended, which makes sense when those are expected to be short. But it's just as well an option to say that for a particular prefix there is a like another registry, or a more or less like static list of numbers that are expanded into longer names. So I don't know, maybe for Cebruski then having that numeric list would be preferable over having the strings. But I'll have to read Cebruski again to know that for sure.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just not quite clear where the which parts are what you call string options versus other parameters. I mean, we're carrying big parameters like certificates and vouchers and so on, but I don't think they're URL parameters.
No, so the question is just about what are the URI path components after any given well-known path, for example, after well-known Cebruski. So if they are just like 4 or 5 static ones, it might just as well make sense to register 4 or 5 entries into this table, maybe not from the like shortest version, but like take a byte more and register them explicitly. So that's an option. And another option is to say that there is a mapping between like numeric values of an additional option, so like a repetition of the option versus using the default behavior of whatever comes after is just strings.
No, we have. If I'm not mistaken, I think we've got a few static ones, and there are all these crazy shortened strings for pretty much everything that we had in Brewski.
Okay.
Right. So there is the table in section 632, and then you have here is a Brewski and EST enrolled status, for example, and that is ES for in Cbrewski. And so that's a static table that we have there. How many entries? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Which goes across Brewski and EST. Now I'm somewhat wasn't there constrained EST anyhow? So I'm a little bit confused here. Let me see. EST co-op.
Well, you seem to have a .reno on Brewski and a .reno on EST.
Yeah, exactly. So, but the EST stuff, I think, would need to be, if we wanted to go for the binary abbreviation for EST, that I think ultimately would need to be an update to RFC 9148, because I think in the constraint Brewski, we're just mentioning that stuff informationally. and it's 9148 that's authoritative.
Yeah.
So
So
at least
I would simply define a well-known EST and leave the rest as is.
Yeah, with
Okay.
then hopefully something informationally in this new document saying that one of the goals of, or one of the benefits of this new work is to avoid the need for this duplication of string registrations as were done in 9148, right? Instead of, if you look into table 1 in 9148, which is authoritative as opposed to Brewski, which is yet just a draft, right? But this table,
Yeah.
if you ask me, could have been avoided or would have been changed with the new mechanism to just for each of the uncompressed EST path components to be given a binary option when CoAP is being used.
I think that's a really good example. Yeah.
Okay. Do you understand, right, that the two of you are the authors of that document, or are authors of the document, right?
No,
So-
9148,
9148.
I'm an author,
You
and
know.
Seabruski, I'm an author. Yeah.
Yeah. In that case, I'm happy to add that as an example of like, had we had like this is something we did earlier, but we wouldn't have to do that now because it could be done this way.
Yeah.
Yep.
You're still in the queue, Douglas. Anything more to add?
No, I'm done with this topic.
Thanks. Any more comments or questions? So I guess Christian and Michael have enough material for Dasho 2.
Yes. And I think the only question from looking at the ones that were open that is really left open for me is about that one about are we happy with the proxy URI interaction and the unsafe and the proxy unsafe bit? And I think that will best be handled by a few examples on the mailing list. And if everyone is convinced that that's still a good idea, then we can keep doing it. In particular, it's really if anyone knows any implementation that did anything with the proxy URI option, like please talk to me, because like every implementation I've had my hands in, if they used it, they like I actively discouraged them from doing that. So therefore, I don't know any widespread use of that option.
Yeah, just as a reminder why this option exists, there is only a limited set of URIs that can be represented in the CoAP options we have for representing CoAP URIs. So if you want to represent something that is syntactically not supported by those options, you need something like proxy URIs. And usually the recommendation would be don't do that.
So the best example I could come up with why we should have a conflict is a client requests a compressed, well-known path from a proxy. That proxy forwards that request through some mechanism where it really rewrites the scheme and host to something that is out of the syntax, like FTP or HTTP with a username and password, sends that on through CoAP for the next proxy to go through HTTP and then all the way back again. And that would be a reason why a proxy would rewrite a request that it received in terms of options into a proxy URI option. And I think the example is very absurd. So the question is like, is there any more realistic case of why this might have happened?
Yeah, I think the most likely case actually is when you have path components or query components that are not UTF-8.
Yeah. But those could not land on the co-op server on the other side in the first place. So
yeah, percent encoding. Yes.
And if a like that would require a proxy that meddles with the path and query, and yes, that proxy would produce something that is hard to understand by the origin server.
Yeah, so we put in some flexibility where we didn't really know how we were going to use it, and it turns out that it's usually too hard to use it.
Just a curiosity, to set up an example like that, do you necessarily need a chain of at least 2 proxies, or can you even with one only?
Yes,
Okay.
because like the client does not produce a proxy. The client, at least if it is using the compressed path options, it knows that it's not using proxy URI at the same time. So it needs to use at least one proxy that turns it all into a proxy URI option. But that only makes sense if it goes to another proxy. So yes, it has to be at least 2 proxies, and probably more, because there has to be something in there that's not expressible in co-op. So there has to be some part of the link that is definitely not co-op. And at that point, I think it's the situation is sufficiently absurd.
Yeah, also composing a proxy URI like it's written in the draft feels like the proxy is moving forward towards another proxy.
Yeah,
Not
that
really to the
would
origin.
be the only reason why I would do
Yeah.
that. But like having multiple proxies is not a bad thing on its own. So
Right, thank you.
and as I understand, it's also like you could use the proxy URI scheme to say that, hey, like I want to post this, but I want to post it to an email address. That makes a lot of sense if it's a client doing that, because there's like it gets a URI that it doesn't understand. It just like puts it into the URI and the proxy URI option, so that the proxy can take care of doing things. That's probably that's a good thing, but that's not something that a proxy would translate into.
Good, thanks again. So any more comments or input again? If none, thanks for the very good discussion. And Karsten Torres.
Yeah, so I was wondering about a separate topic. So not this draft. So I was wondering, before you folks want to close the meeting,
We run until past. Actually, we are scheduled for 90 minutes. So we have time for AUB.
So I'm done. Thanks for all your input. Happy to move on to AUB.
Right. Yeah. So I was presenting on this constrained grasp work that we wanted to figure out the right direction for in the core meeting, and was suggested to bring this up in interim. So I didn't have time in August much to officially ask for time. So if that's the best way to go forward, then I can prepare new slides for that. But yeah, I was wondering if people in general had suggestions about the 3 options that I was presenting to bring that work in, and yeah, how to make some decision direction.
Can you quickly recap the 3 options if you remember them out of your head?
Yeah. So the first one was to simply say, let's try to extract from CoAP the reliable message layer and make that available as a real service for other protocols to work on top of it, so that we could reuse that lower layer of CoAP officially, because right now it's not documented in that way. The second one is to, and I apologize, the name again, right? So they're in CoAP a set of what is it? Commands. Darn. Was command the right term?
Method.
Verbs.
Methods, yeah.
Methods.
Different methods, yeah, exactly. So that was to bring in the things we would, in our opinion, need to make GRASP work better as kind of a real CoAP feature through additional methods. And for example, one of the things that GRASP does is multicasting. So sending the same reliable messages to more than one recipient, and that's hard to imagine doing efficiently just as a CoAP application, right? So and then the third option, of course, is being to simply try to define GRASP on top of CoAP as an application, and that's just incurring the inefficiencies of what I think we could do better when we add new methods.
So the last part you could imagine doing somehow as, or I could imagine doing it somehow as multicasted CoAP observe, I'm going to call them responses. So whatever the response you normally get from an observe, so it doesn't include the whole method request. It just includes the response.
Yeah, I was even thinking at doing the multicast through a new method as a multicast at the reliable message layer, because ultimately you want to send some packet message to more than one receiver, and you need to wait for all the acknowledgements. So if it's in the message layer, you can have one buffer in your implementation, and you're remembering when you received the last acknowledgement, and then you can release the buffer. If you're trying to put it above the message layer, I have a hard time imagining how an implementation can avoid having to do a lot more complex things like, I don't know, trying to have one and the same buffer in multiple connections still share the same memory space. So I've seen those things become very complicated if that's not seen up front.
Yeah, I think it's pretty obvious that the graph semantics are not the CoAP semantics. So trying to somehow map one on the other is always going to be awkward. The message layer may actually fit very well. So what we need to find out is what is the southbound interface of the GRASP semantic layer? What does it actually need? And then we can say which parts of the message layer this could go through. And we could also identify things that maybe the CoAP message layer doesn't do yet.
Right. Yeah, and that's exactly what I think these two type of methods, I was imagining are an attempt to express, right? So the first thing is really, reliably send messages to a set of neighbors. And the second one is pretty much the back and forth atomic sequence of messages, right? So if I'm not mistaken, CoAP right now, all the methods are similar to HTTP in terms of you have a request and reply, and that's kind of an atomic thing.
Yes.
And that's independent of the state of any other, message exchanges that are being done, even in the same connection. And in GRASP, one of the core idea that Brian Carpenter, who came up with GRASP, wanted to have was that you had a negotiation, right, which is a sequence of back and forth that ends up with success or failure from either side at the end, and that success or failure at the end of multiple exchanges could then have an impact on the semantic of what was exchanged, right? So for I was trying to give the example that in routers you very often, if you're doing configuration on the other on the client on the server, for example, right? So you're the initiator, you want to configure a router, let's say through CoAP in this case, and through GRASP CoAP with multiple commands, with multiple instructions, but you only want to have all these instructions be applied when all of them can be applied. So you're sending the first command and the device, and you're saying, but this is now a negotiation for everything. So command 1, server replies yes, fine. Command 2, server replies yes, fine. Command 3, server replies no, sorry, can't do. So failure, which means that none of the commands got applied, right? So that's one example. The example that Brian was given was typically a back and forth in negotiating some parameter values, right? So give me 100 megabyte of, I don't know, BGP buffer space or whatever the parameter is, and the device says no, can't do, it's too much. And then you say, well, give me 10 megabytes. Yes, you can have it. Oh, no, wait a second. Give me 50, right? So this interpolation to find the best available value you can set for a parameter. If you don't have the ability to kind of simply ask, well, give me the best value, right? Because requesting a value may be a more complex process that the device cannot by itself figure out what the best one is. Right, so these type of multi-exchanges are something that don't natively map against the typical individual, is it fair to say REST mechanism in HTTP or CoAP? And that's what the negotiate in GRASP does.
Yeah, so you have to order things, and there's lots of interesting stuff. And again, it would be good to actually have a collection of the kind of things that you want to support, and also to have an idea how you actually want to do security. Multicast security is easy in CoAP because we have ad hoc, but I don't know how that will translate to what you want to do in Anima. So that's another thing that we have to talk about, because there's no way to multicast anything with DTLS.
No, of course not.
So say that I think Torlis missed to say that one of the sides here is that so then after you've done the negotiation in GRASP, you normally then turn and said, okay, I found something, and then you use a TCP connection to send some stuff back and forth. And so there's some people that would like to get rid of that TCP connection and potentially replace it with just CoAP. Yeah. And so at that point you say, well, can I do everything with CoAP, or can I at least reuse as much of that as I can? And I think that's where some of the conversation comes back and forth. And please, one of the things we said is please don't try to reinvent something else that's not CoAP, that's not TCP, because you're just wasting your time.
Yeah, so for example, GRASP hasn't been very successful, and it shouldn't be, very successful if we would just be doing exactly the same things that we could equally do with HTTP over TCP or CoAP. And that, of course, is exactly why it would make sense for us. It would help us a lot to make the direction of GRASP more successful if it was just an extension of an already otherwise lightweight enough protocol like CoAP, which we didn't have in the beginning in our thinking when I think Anima is so old that everything was thinking about HTTP, and that was just not extensible enough, right? So into the HTTP model, it wouldn't have been possible to bring the multicast aspects in, or the multi round trip thing, right? So at least we could never figure out how we could say we're expanding it that way. And now by looking into CoAP, of course, it seems a lot more clear that we could do the additional functions we want to do through GRASP as extensions to CoAP, and that makes it a lot more logical than to say, well, you don't have to use these options if you don't need to. And I think, for example, this multi-round trip stuff is fairly advanced. I wish we would ever get closer to applications that actually use that. On the other hand, the multi-hop multicast is a big pain point. I think we've tried to solve several times and never really got to a good solution. So in DNS, for example, MDNS multi-hop, people tried it in different variations in the industry, and that never worked out well. Even, when I was with Cisco, the first implementation we did was multi-hop DNS, MDNS, and that was just very painful. And so that's why I was happy when we could do this in the right way, in my opinion, with GRASP. Only that doing it hop by hop over TCP is, of course, very, very overhead intensive.
So the fun part will be something that we did in 2011, 2012, which is looking at the CoAP functionality and doing this incision and separate the message layer from the request response layer. And I think that's pretty much exactly the surgery that you need to do at some point. And that will simplify GRASP a lot because you can then describe it in terms of the message layer interactions. And it will allow us to find out what methods do we actually need on top of the message layer, and do we have to extend the message layer? Because, for instance, right now, the message layer doesn't give you reliability for multicast.
Well, so that's I think where the two options would differ, right? So if I was thinking of adding a new multicast method, then I would do the multicasting as part of the description of the method. And I think that would be the easiest way in terms of I don't have to separate out the message layer. I'm just saying that this method is mapping over to triggering, multiple reliable messages, one each to each of the neighbor in that multicast group, and sharing the buffer. Right. So I think one could get away without.
We'll continue this at some point because I don't think anybody else is interested in this discussion.
Yeah, no. I was just looking for suggestion. What from our side, the most useful next step in work in writing things up would be, from your opinion.
Yeah, sit down and explain what are the interactions you want to have, and maybe suggest how these can be split into a message layer and request response layer. It's, in your case, it's something else layer.
Right. So I guess then, from my perspective, if I was thinking of my preference, it would be kind of putting together a proposal for the method, the new method, and then see how that's perceived. And if that's seen as problematic, then go to trying to separate out the description of the message layer and put it there.
Yeah, I'd rather you do what I said, because if you somehow couple things to an existing preconception of what message layer and what GRASP layer actually are doing, then you will arrive at a suboptimal design.
Okay, thank you.
Christian?
Yeah, I was about to ask, because from all I've heard, and I didn't have all of this in hot cache anymore, what's the problem with mapping it over co-op with maybe some options that work efficiently for this case. But if you do write up what you like, what the interactions you want are, as Carsten suggested, I'll be happy to go through that and evaluate the grasp as an application proposal, because I think it can work well. If, for example, you do say, yeah, we don't do URI host, we don't do URI path, but we do co-op in general, well, on a more like generalized model, I think that can well work. But it's best evaluated if we know what those concrete cases are where things are tricky.
I think the most simple explanation is that Grasp originally was thinking about being a framework to more easily do protocols like you see in the routing area, right? So network layer protocols between network devices, which have wonderful ASCII graphics to describe messages, and that don't know and don't want to know what a URI is, and would hate to ever have to think about URIs. So Grasp doesn't have URIs. It has just a simple registry for the different code protocols or so on, right? So that's I think the basic thing that for those users of Grasp we were trying to maintain somehow.
But I do still think that there's that there's another incision point that would be usable, that is not splitting the message from the request response layer, that could also produce a viable solution. But as I said, if you can write up the interactions, we can explore from there.
Okay, thanks a lot for this, and we still have some time for another AUB item that Carsten wanted to cover on the href document. You don't have slides, Carsten, right?
Yeah, that's correct. So we have a repository for href. So if somebody likes, you could screen share that. And the document has been in AD review, and we had one question that Christian put up that we had to address. And there is now a pull request number 135 that has a proposal how to do that. And Christian had, I think, a small editorial change that maybe I have to edit a little bit more. So with that, we should have covered the review by Mike Bishop. There also has been a review by Arndt Gulbrandsen that essentially boils down to, can you provide more examples? And of course, the answer is yes, we can always provide more examples. The only question is that productive? And so what probably would be useful for people to do is look at the response to Arndt's message that I will send out in a couple of minutes, and think about examples. And I don't really want to come up with my own examples here. I can come up with an unlimited number of examples, but the question is which examples actually help understanding the document. So if people would be able to send me a few pull requests with examples, I could put them in. I really want to publish a new revision of the internet draft by the end of this week, because we are really done. We just have to work on this potentially unlimited examples would help request. So that's all I wanted to say about that, unless people think we should work on the examples for 2 more months and then send a revised version to Mike Bishop.
Heard none. Reading none. Good.
Okay.
Thanks, Carsten.
So go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just saying, I think I go ahead as planned, send the response to Arndt, and Christian already had provided a good part of the response, so that's going to be quick. And then we spent a couple more days on maybe integrating a few examples and ship it to Mike. Great.
Anything major that you think needs to be updated in the Shepherd write-up, by the way?
Oh, I haven't checked that. That's a good point. Let me do
Yeah,
that.
Thomas is the Shepherd, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't think so, but it really makes sense to check that.
Okay, thanks. So that brings us to the end of the meeting for today. Anything more you wanted to discuss about core? Heard none. Thanks a lot for today. Thanks, Christian, also for taking most of the notes while leading the session. Talk to you in 2 weeks. Thank you all.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.